Again, this is the last installment in our Reboot 2022 series, and today we're going to be talking about interviews and negotiations, which is something that can feel a little bit difficult if it's been a while since you've had to maybe interview, or if you've never even negotiated but you've always sort of wanted to. We've got some information on that as well. So we'll be talking a little bit in the beginning about types of interviews and questions that you might encounter. Some special considerations given that we are now in sort of a hybrid environment. Some interview processes that you are a part of might have a hybrid model. So there might be some in-person and virtual mixed in with those. And there are several different ways that recruiters are interviewing nowadays, so we'll talk about those as well. Some resources that you have to practice and feel a little bit better about that. And then we'll close things out today with managing negotiations. So a couple quick things. If you do have questions for me, I would love for you to ask them. Please don't feel like you have to wait until the end. I always have a few slides and then we'll do a pause for questions. So if you've got something that pops in your head, go ahead and throw that in the Q&A down there at the bottom part of your screen. And we'll get to that in a few slides. My contact information is down there, so happy to chat with you. Please reach out if you have any questions or if you want to talk about your individual situation or practice an interview coming up. So as I mentioned a minute ago, we have some really great resources here for you. So I am our career advisor that works with our alumni and grad students on campus. As an alumni of the University of Richmond, you get career services free for life, which is a really amazing deal. Not a lot of institutions offer that. And so what that means is that you can always access career services, the programs that we offer, as well as one-on-one career advising, and we don't limit that. So you can have as many or as little, career advising appointments with me as you would like, as you see fit for your situation. And there's lots of different topics you can see over there that we cover in our sessions. And so we can run the whole gamut of things depending on what situation you're in and what sort of help and support you're needing. If that sounds really cool to you and you would like some more information on how to connect and schedule an appointment, Spider Connect is that link down there that you would access. And if you're like, that sounds really great, but I have no idea what that is, shoot me an email and I'll give you some information on how to access it. Lastly, on this page, we have the archived, we have the whole cadre of our virtual programs that are on the UR Alumni Relations YouTube page, which you can access there. And so all of my past webinars are there as well, if there are other topics you're interested in that you might want some more information on. So that's a little bit about your resources here, and we'll go ahead and dive into our content. So I wanted to start off with just the types of interviews, because if it's maybe been a while, or you're maybe knowing that you might be gearing up for some interviews soon, there's a number of ways in which an employer or a recruiter might want to interview you. So some of them are typically, they'll start off with some kind of a screening interview. Nowadays, they might either want to do that on the phone, or it might be a virtual, like a video screen interview, right? So chatting with them over Zoom or some other platform. Typically the screening interviews, because they're first round, they're gonna not be terribly long, so about 20 to 30 minutes. Usually this interview is conducted by a member of the human resources team. So typically the recruiter on the HR team that is overseeing the hiring for this particular position. And so really the purpose of this for them is to screen you as a potential or as an applicant for this role. It's to screen the information that you have provided to them to see, okay, so this person is telling me that they're good at these things, or they have these skills. Let's ask them some questions. Maybe maybe they want to do a little bit of a deeper dive into some stuff on your resume or other information that you've provided, and see, do they really have what they say they're having, right? So it's really just an initial screen to check on your skills and the information that you're providing. And then they make the decision from there on who moves on to the next round. Typically, the next round of interviews is then conducted by either an interview committee or the hiring manager or other members of the particular department or office, the sector of that business in which the role would be hired for. Conference calls are another way of interviewing. And, sometimes sometimes at the University of Richmond we'll do those as well. I've been on many of those on the other side of those myself. Conference call interviews, those are perhaps the most awkward of the awkward. I always like to mention it here just in case you are, usually that's a situation where you would call in, you have to enter some kind of a code to access the conference call. Multiple people typically is the reason why they would want to do this. If they have an interview committee. So really to get ready for these, have all of your call-in information ready. So the number that you would be dialing, any type of access code that you might need to put in, just so you don't have to maybe search through emails or whatnot. And I say pack your patience here because if you've ever been on a conference call for any other reason, you would probably understand this. It can be sometimes difficult to hear people who are perhaps on the other side of the room, farther away from the speaker. You might have to ask people to repeat themselves, or they might ask you to repeat yourself in an answer. So just having a lot of courtesy, a lot of grace, some patience there in terms of how the conversation flows, because it might not flow the way that you're used to a conversation flowing. There might be some additional pauses in there, which most of us are not used to silent pauses in conversation. We want to fill those. And so just being okay with that, particularly in a conference call, I think is a really good practice to have. Video calls, in the last couple of years, I think a lot of us have gotten more used to video conferencing, video calls. There are so many now, particularly there are so many different platforms that one can use, Zoom, Microsoft Teams, I think it's Microsoft Teams, Adobe Connect. There's so many different ways in which people, WebEx, the platforms. And so just making sure that whatever it is, particularly if you're not familiar with it, making sure that you're preparing yourself for that platform when you do get in there, because while they all have the same functions, such as mute and unmute, turn off your video, turn on your video, share screen, the buttons and how to the function, where those functions are located in the platform might be different than what you're used to. So what I would recommend here in preparation for any kind of video call for a platform you're not used to, watch some YouTube videos, just try to get familiar with it. So when you get in there visually, you are prepared for where things are. Just a quick example, this was not an interview, but it was a video call with an organization that was outside of the University of Richmond. And so they use, I think it was, might have been the Google platform. I can't remember exactly what it's called, but it was the Google video conferencing platform. And I was wholly unprepared for where all of my buttons were. And so I couldn't figure out how to unmute myself. And so it took me a second, which, it was just a meeting. So it wasn't that big of a deal, but, I could imagine myself being in an interview and feeling really awkward. And if that's the way that I started out my interview, it would sort of cloud the rest of the interview for me, right? So all of this is just about making sure that you're as prepared as possible, you're familiar with the platform, so it reduces that part of the anxiety, and you can really just focus on the interview itself and making a great first impression. The last one here, pre-recorded interviews. So these are the newer types of interviews on the market. Although they've been around for a while, they have gotten a lot more traction in the last couple of years with the remote interviewing that's been going on. And so these are typically done in the first one or two rounds before they really get into final selections of candidates. And so pre-recorded interviews are, again, done on a variety of different platforms. It just depends on the one that the employer is using. And this is a situation where you would record yourself answering some interview questions, and it would be sent in to the hiring manager to review and then decide who's moving on from there. This can go a variety of different ways. So sometimes they will send you the questions prior, sometimes they won't. Sometimes you will get multiple chances in the video recording to say re-record yourself and do that answer again. Sometimes you get 1 or 2 tries. And so hopefully, if this is the case, the employer is giving you some good prep information in terms of how this works. Say, hopefully they'll give you information like, these are the types of questions we'll ask. You'll have 1 to 2 minutes to answer the question. You can practice it, or you can have a sort of a do-over once. Hopefully they'll give you some more information so you'll feel a little bit more prepared. But just know that these are a thing. One good way that I can recommend that you practice this is, if you have a Zoom account, you can make one for free, or any other sort of video conferencing platform, but just Zoom is the one that I'm familiar with. You can just start a meeting with just yourself and record yourself. You can record that meeting, and then you can do a playback. And so this is a really good way for you to practice answering some questions and give yourself some real-time video feedback with that. Sorry, let me find my little mouse over here. So I can move on to the next slide. There we go. Sorry. I'm talking about being prepared. So my next couple slides are just some questions, right? So these are some common interview type questions that you might encounter. My next slide incorporates questions that you would want to be asking, because of course that's the other part of the interview, that you would have a chance to ask the interviewer questions, which oftentimes falls off the radar when you're preparing, because you think, okay, I want to make sure that I'm answering their questions correctly. But another really, really important part of that is when you get to ask them questions. So definitely don't forget to think about that. However, when it comes to questions you might be asked, I like to think about them in several different types of categories. Now, of course, this is just a primer. There are so many different types that they could ask you, and it's hard to prepare for every scenario. However, I think one of the best ways to prepare, to think about what types of questions that they might, or what questions they might ask you, is refer back to that job description. What are the skills and abilities that they're asking for that are important to them within this role? Because they're going to be basing questions on that, because the whole point of the interview is to assess whether you'd be a good fit for this role, right? So start there. So many common or introductory type questions, the ones that probably typically people maybe stumble on at first. These are good ones to practice and get a really good answer down for yourself. So tell me about yourself, the one that people really don't like the most. They might ask questions around your strengths and weaknesses. How do you handle failure and successes or successes? And questions around, your knowledge of their company, right? What do you know about us? How do you see yourself fitting in with our organization? Why did you apply for this role? So a lot of these are just really get to know you questions. Case interview and scenario type questions. So these would really be, this is an area where you can showcase your analysis and problem solving skills. And so these would be, they might give you a specific scenario that's either similar to one that their organization has dealt with in the past, and try to get you to describe how you would handle it. We do have some really good resources on case interviews that I can share with you, point you to how to get there. And we do also have, when you are scheduling an appointment, you do have an option to schedule a case mock interview to practice those specific things. There are several industries that like case interviews. Behavioral situational questions, those are the ones that you would probably encounter most frequently. They're the ones that most people identify they have trouble with in interviews. So those are the questions that really get you to recall a specific situation or scenario. And what they're doing here is they're assessing your skills for the job. So again, based on that job description and what they're asking for, this is where you can, for behavioral questions, prepare, certain professional situations or scenarios which have highlighted those skills that you can share. Now, I say STAR interview method down here. Some of you might have heard about that before. That's an acronym that stands for situation, task, action, and result. Again, I can send some more information on that later. But the STAR is the acronym that can help you answer behavioral questions in a very succinct manner that gets your point across, right? So if you're recalling a situation for an answer here, you would want to focus your answer on describing the situation for them. What were the tasks that you had in front of you to do, the actions that you took, and then what happened as a result of those actions, right? So that's just a good way to help keep yourself on track with your answer, because the last thing that you want to do in an interview is have 5 minutes pass with an answer and people are wondering to themselves, what was even the question that they asked you? So this helps keep you on track. Definitely in interviews, they might ask you, depending on where you are in your professional journey, they might ask you about some leadership qualities that you have, particularly those that have been in the workforce for a while, and maybe you're interviewing for some jobs that have some leadership expectations. Really thinking about what your leadership style is, some accomplishments that you've had in the past, and sort of, particularly for roles with supervision or any kind of directory type stuff. What are your visions and expectations for this role, right? What do you want to see in that? Because that's the kind of thing that they're looking for from a leader. Particularly nowadays as well, you will probably get questions, as many jobs are either fully remote or hybrid experience where they have some in-office and remote work flexibility options there. You're going to want to think about ways in which you can showcase your remote or virtual work abilities, right? What kind of successes have you had? How do you handle team dynamics and, making sure that you're accomplishing goals in a virtual environment? How do you communicate with your team members? How do you make sure that they're up to date on your projects and what you're doing? So thinking about how you have mastered or handled things in this environment is really important, because they could ask you very specific questions about, tell me how you've done certain things in a remote work environment, right? There are some illegal questions over there that you can see. They're probably not anything that's a surprise to you, but really questions in an interview should be related to the job. And if they are asking you some illegal questions, things that just sort of make you a little bit, skeeved out there, it depends on the situation, but, just, you can always politely decline to answer, or if it makes you really, really creeped out, you always have the right to stop the interview and just, very politely, and just have everybody move on there. The other thing that I have up here is, really being prepared to talk about why you might have left a company. This is really for folks that might have a little bit of a gap on their resume. Maybe they're sort of between situations. And so really just thinking about how would you address that, and making sure that you're getting in front of any assumptions here, because that would be, I think the tide is turning in terms of how employers view gaps on resumes or breaks, taking a break from the workforce, because there are a variety of reasons why we could do that, right? And just thinking about how you would tell your story that way, so you can you can take ownership and you take charge of that story, instead of having the people on the other side of the table from you making assumptions about that, right? Usually they're viewed favorably. They just want some context. That's all. And if that's your particular situation, we can definitely talk more one-on-one because those are very individualized. And I understand that. So we can definitely chat. So as I mentioned earlier, really good to think about what questions will you ask them? Because when you get to the portion of the interview where they say, hey, do you have any questions for us? The last thing that you want to do is say, no, thanks, I'm good. I think I have all the information I need. They want to see your genuine interest in this role and in this organization and how you would be a part of it. So there are a lot of different types of questions that you could ask. I always say interviewing is a two-way street, right? They are assessing you, you are assessing them. Would you be a good fit in this team, in this role, in this organization as a whole, right? So make your questions count. It's also really important to think about who is on the other side of that interview. Say if you're having a screening interview for the first round and you're talking to somebody from the HR office, they might not know particular question, they might not know the answers to some particular questions about specific things about the role, right? Those questions might be better suited for, say, the hiring manager when you get there, right? But there are other questions that might be better suited for the HR person, say is like, how is performance evaluated at this organization? How would my performance in this role be evaluated? What kind of training and development opportunities are offered to new employees, right? So those would be good questions maybe to ask the HR person. So as you can see here, again, there are a lot of different types of questions asking about the job. Again, with any of these, you want to make sure that you fully understand the job description so you're not asking questions that can be found somewhere. So making sure that you have definitely done your due diligence and that you understand things. But if there are specific questions that you have about some of these things that you haven't been able to find anywhere that have not been addressed, that's a good chance to ask them. Because the whole point here is for you to figure out, how am I going to fit in here? And am I going to like it? And there might be particular, if you've been working for any amount of time, there might be certain things that you sort of know about yourself that you are looking for, or that's really important to you to have in your next role. Because you could have been through a situation in the past, or maybe you're currently in a situation now where you maybe aren't that happy. And maybe you know that there are certain things that you need to have in your next role to really feel like you're thriving in that job, right? And so those are good. You can sort of frame questions around that. There's always a tactful way to ask a question. And so you can ask questions to get the answers that you want in a way that, say, doesn't paint your current or past employer in a negative light. But you can still, say, get information that you need, right? An example of that would be, say, if you have come from, or you're in a situation where, the style of your manager or the management of that organization is just not, working for you. Like, say, I've been before in a situation with a micromanager, very, very tough to deal with. But you can ask questions in an interview that help you understand what the management style is without giving away the fact that you've been in this situation before. So asking questions like, can you tell me about, if you're talking to the manager that would be your manager in this role, can you tell me about your management style? How do you handle certain situations with employees, right? Those would be good questions to ask that can help shed a light on how you might be in that role. Okay. So again, these slides are coming out afterwards. So you can take note of more of these here, but there are a lot of different questions you can ask. At the end of the day, make sure that they are helping you evaluate the situation and that they're meaningful and poignant for the role that you're going into. So, how can you practice, right? There are a lot of different ways in which you can do that, and you have access to some of these resources. A product that we have through the University of Richmond is Interview Stream, which is a great product. Again, that's a system where you can get it's based on artificial intelligence, and so the system would ask you certain interview questions and you would get to practice and record a video, and then it would give you feedback based on that recording. Of course, you could do a mock interview with myself or another advisor on the career services team. And one of the great things here that I love is LinkedIn is a great new feature. Well, I guess it was new a year or so ago. I think it came out around the beginning of the pandemic. But it's a really, really great feature. And the best part is it is free. You do not have to pay for the premium version of LinkedIn to get access to this. So if you, let me see if I can't navigate over here really quickly and show you. So if you, from your home screen LinkedIn, if you go to your jobs tab up here at the top, and then if you go to the interview prep, this is a fantastic feature. Again, it's for free. And so you can practice and get feedback on, it gives you 26 common questions, of course, the dreaded tell me about yourself. And so if you scroll down here a little bit, you can view the answer, like how certain people might answer these questions, right? And so you can watch a video on it. The other thing that you can do here is you can practice and get feedback. So you can either do a written response, or you can record a video and get some feedback there. This is a fantastic resource. I love it. What are your salary expectations? That's not an uncommon question these days, and can really, really throw you for a curve if you're not ready for it. So that's a great thing to be able to practice with. And so I would definitely recommend checking that out as well. So I do have my pause for questions coming up. So if you've got any, throw them in the Q&A there, and I'm going to take a sip of water. Okay, we will go ahead and move on because I don't see any yet. Oops, sorry, let me go back here. So hang on, let me find my place again. Okay. All right, so let me get back here. Excellent. Okay, thank you. So a few sort of special considerations that I wanted to talk about. Again, since we're sort of in a hybrid situation, there might be some interviews that are in person, some that are virtual, whatnot. I just wanted to take a little bit of time just to chat about, things to think about and prepare for when it comes to virtual interviews. One, your environment, things that are in your environment. I think, if you've been working through some of the pandemic, and you have been in either like a hybrid environment or a work from home, some of these things are probably second nature for you to think about. However, good things to particularly take note of when it comes to virtual interviews. So lighting, front or side lighting is best. My funny story from this is years ago, I was actually in a video interview before pandemic, in the before times. And it was not until halfway through the interview that I realized my lighting was so bad that literally half of my face was completely dark and the other half was lit up with sunlight. So it looked very strange. I don't think that's the reason why I wasn't called back for a follow-up interview, but I don't think it helped things, because I was just very funny to look at. Background, making sure that it's neutral and not distracting. Consider having a virtual background, or like this, I love Zoom's new feature of a blurred background. And camera angle, make sure that it is, facing front forward. Really the last, you don't want to have them looking up your nose or at a weird angle for you, and just making sure that the noises are to a minimum at whatever space you're in. And so, like, say if you're in a house, particularly, this is from the early days of the pandemic when I was working from home. at work, like putting a sign on the door, like when I do still work from home some days a week, if there are other folks in my house, say if my husband's also working from home that day, I'll put a sign on my door that says, please do not disturb, because otherwise he will probably barge in that room and ask me a question. So just making sure that those around you are prepared for what's going on. Connectivity, this is a really big important thing here with virtuals, especially making sure you are testing your technology. Again, if it's a new platform that you're not used to, do some research on it, figure out how it works, so make sure that you're comfortable with it when you get in there. Making sure you're testing your speakers and videos. I love my headphones here, making sure that your sound quality is good, because sometimes I have found personally, it probably depends on the speaker quality of a laptop or whatever you might be using. But I think that, headsets or headphones really help your voice to come across clearly and not sound like you're sort of in a tunnel. Okay. And if you can hardwire your internet, that's best, because there are definitely occasions where your internet sort of comes and goes, right? So in terms of how you're showing up, this is one of my favorite examples of this. And again, this was from when, sort of most people were sort of locked down at home and really doing a lot of remote work. This was a guy I used to watch GMA a lot. And he did not realize that the angle of his camera was such that he was showing up in his boxer shorts. He was good to go from the waist up, but was kind of very casual from the waist down. So just making sure that you are testing things out before you get on the actual interview, and that you're showing up the way that you need to show up. Body language, eye contact, really important. Making sure that you're not, that you're looking at the camera most of the time, because it is really awkward though if you're just staring at the camera the entire time. Attire, I think probably how you would show up to an in-person interview, particularly on screen. I like solid colors. A lot of stripes or a lot of heavy, intricate patterns don't necessarily show up very well on video. So I think testing out your wardrobe beforehand to make sure that it's not distracting or showing up funny. And the last thing I'll say here, having notes, but practicing here with virtual interviews. I think one of the great things is about that space is that you can certainly have the advantage of having some notes in front of you, but making sure that the video chat in your interview is also natural feeling, right? So one of my favorite tricks to do was to have when I was really exclusively working from home and doing a lot of stuff there, I would have little Post-it notes taped around the screen of my laptop. So they were just sort of reminders to me of certain things. Did that in a lot of presentations. And so you can consider doing that for interviews. So it's just there if you need to take a quick glance over at it and say, oh, reminder of like this particular situation or scenario that I wanted to highlight, right? Or maybe like, these are the reasons, why I'm interested in this organization. So I think that's really helpful. I think it's probably obvious, but like the one thing you really want to avoid is having notes and just doing this the entire interview and not making contact with the people that you're interviewing with. Yep. Okay, so pause for questions. If you've got any, I'll give you a little bit to get them in there, and then we'll wrap up. So that's a great question. Thank you, Olivia. You did not miss it because I didn't go into depth about it. But so she just asked how to structure or address, tell me about yourself or walk me through your resume. So walk me through your resume. I'll address that first because it's a little bit easier. What you want to avoid here is reading them the things that they can read, right? Do not, go chronologically. Okay, so in 2016, I graduated from the University of Richmond, and then I started working here, and then I started working there, right? Because they can do that. What they're getting at here is sort of, what's your story, right? Like, how did you end up where you are today? And maybe I think what you could do here is, what are some maybe highlights or accomplishments from roles or other experiences that you've had that are on your resume? right, that would make you say a good fit for this role. So hopefully that's helpful, at least in getting started thinking about that one. And tell me about yourself. Again, this is the one that people really dread the most, and it can be taken in a lot of different ways. I will tell you, being on the other side of interviews, the thing that drives me bonkers the most is when we ask this question and they say, again, like a sort of a chronological listing of themselves. Well, I graduated from this institution at this point, and as you can see, I've been doing this and this and this, right? Okay, we can read all that information. Tell me about yourself. I think the best approach to that would be, tell me your story, right? How did you, what's, throughout all of your experiences, what's been that common interest of things for you? How did you get here, right? Like, and so this is a great question to tell a little bit about your story, why you're a good fit for this role, and tie it back into why are you here today, right? Like, why are you interested in and interviewing for this position? Because somehow your story, your professional journey has taken you here. Okay. Now, again, I say that in our presentation today, and I know that there's probably a lot more to it, but hopefully that gives you a starting point, Olivia. And again, like, I would love to chat more about your particular situation and helping you figure out how to address that. That was a great question. All right. As we're wrapping up, this is our last slide. So we'll talk a little bit about offers and negotiations. Again, all the information here is meant to just be really a primer to help you get started thinking about this, because everybody has their own individual situation in terms of how they address some of these things, right? Negotiations, it is hard for a lot of people to wrap their mind around. A lot of people probably want to negotiate, but don't because of fears, anxieties, all kinds of things, right? Maybe they've never done it before, so they don't know how to approach it. And it feels really scary. I think it's really important to remember the majority of the time there is probably some room for negotiation. Even if it's not salary, there's other things you can negotiate. And you are never at a better place to negotiate than when you get an offer, because when you get an offer, they're telling you, you are our number one pick and we want you the most. So that is your chance to come back with counter offers and possibly negotiate, accept or reject an offer. Because I think it's also really important in the interview process to remember that even though you might, in your heart of hearts feel like, I desperately want or desperately need a job, or, need a new situation, an offer is an offer, and you have the ability to either accept that offer or reject it, right? You are not obliged to anything just because you've been through the interview process. So first, always take time to think. This was one of the best pieces of advice I ever got when I first started out on my professional journey. It's actually a family member who told me this, and they said, no matter if you are jumping out of your seat with excitement about a job offer, when you get that phone call, always ask for time to think about it, right? Because you just want to make sure that you do your due diligence and that it's the right situation for you. Even if you know in your heart, like, I will definitely take this job offer, take some time to think about it. One thing to be on the lookout for, which has increased a lot lately, are something we call exploding offers. They are situations you might have been in them before, where you get the job offer via phone or email, and they say, so we need to know your answer within 24 hours. Technically not illegal, although it is not a very good look. It puts too much pressure, right? So in that situation, I do always recommend asking for an additional, an extension of time to think about that. And always recommend saying, giving them a timeline, not just saying, can I have some extra time? Because they could come back and say, yeah, tell me in 48 hours. And then that's, still not enough time. So give them, Can I have 5 days? Can I have a week to get back to you? Something like that. Again, the scarcity mindset, I think a lot of people, what I was talking about earlier, are, feeling when they're, especially when they're on the job search or the interview process, and thinking like, oh my gosh, I don't know when I'm going to get another offer. I have to take this. Prime example, I was years ago, I was in the middle of a job search, and I will just say I really needed a job. And I think overall it was a 10-month job search. Halfway through that job search, I got a job offer. That's a really good job offer. I mean, it was not bad, but for specific reasons, it would just not fit my family's lifestyle and what we were needing and looking for at that point. Did a lot of soul searching, a lot of talking with my husband, and we decided that was not the best fit for me. And man, I had some family members that did not understand that. But I was not needing a job so much that I was willing to sacrifice or compromise on certain things, right? That we knew would just not work for us. So I had to decline that offer. So just know that, there are situations in which that might happen for you. In the interest of time, I'm going to go through a few of these other things. Again, there are other things that you can negotiate, vacation, sick, PTO time. You can perhaps get, maybe swap or compromise some things for, say, a little bit of a hiring bonus, maybe relocation benefits, that kind of stuff. I've been in situations before where I've essentially swapped things, right? Like I asked for essentially an annual salary raise, like just an increase in the salary offer. And they came back and said, okay, so we don't have the capacity to do that, but we can, give you this instead. Right. And it was not what I initially wanted, but it was a really good offer. And so I took it. I think when negotiating, a couple of things to keep in mind here, most important notes, have things written, right? Because you want to have a record of stuff. So, if you do a counter offer, I would say over email, making sure that you again have record of that information. And one of the things I always get a question about too is if asked early about salary, because you might find that a lot. You might they say in your application materials, let us know what your salary expectations are, or even in that first screening interview, part of their screening for this might be, are you going to have outrageous salary expectations? And then we're not going to be able to make a deal at the end if you get an offer, right? So you may get asked up early on about this. And so this is a good approach and example of how you might address that. Based on market research, you want to know about your company. The range I'm thinking of is this. In that range, I recommend anywhere, like giving yourself a good girth there. So like $5,000 to $10,000 would probably be a good range to think about with that. And then bringing it back around to, but instead of focusing on the numbers right now, I really want to sort of move forward and keep discussing the role, right? And so I think in this situation, they're really just trying to get a sense of, are you way off base here? Can we come to a deal at the end? So again, in the interest of time, I want to make sure that we are not, I'm not using up your afternoon time if you need it. But that's a little bit about negotiations. You've got questions, I'm happy to stay on the line and answer any that you have. So you can throw them in the Q&A there. But I think at least getting started with negotiations, this is a good place to begin. I think knowing that you always have the right and you always have the ability to negotiate, even if they come back and say, we don't have the capacity for that. That's okay. You will never know until you ask. And I think that's really important to remember too. So as we wrap up, again, thank you so much for joining me. If you have participated in all of this webinar series, thank you. I think that's fantastic, and I hope you got a lot out of it. And if you're new with me today, again, hope you got some really good information. This is just a primer. And so I would love to chat though more one-on-one about your individual situations. should they come up for you, because it really does take that kind of an approach to help you feel really confident and successful with your interview process. So have any questions, just shoot me an email. But again, thanks so much for joining me, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.